Greetings! It is I, Tentus Dracovin, your Lord Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and of course, welcome. Welcome to those of you joining me live, of course, on the Twitch channel for the Dracovin Empire, and those of you joining me later on the YouTube channel, also welcome to all of you. Yes, we are diving once more into the world of Shadowrun, into the sixth world, and into the 2080s, and talking about, well, what countries there are in the world. This time, we're heading to Asia. Now, I will be using the Shadows of Asia book. I'll show off this in a minute here. But just to note, we aren't going to be doing some other stuff. There will be one more episode like this at very least. Well, we also do North America, South America still, and then other nations of the world. So we got a little bit more on our tour here. We've hit up a good chunk of the world. But certainly, there's still some countries left to talk about. And they're fun ones, too. But let's get started, because honestly, it's always fun to just dive in, and we can talk about the countries of the world all we want. We got countries to show off and stuff. And I'll start with, this is the book I would definitely recommend if you are going to be looking into a lot of these countries in Asia. I'm not saying that every country that's out there in Asia isn't defined in other adventures, sources, and books and stuff like that. Things like Russia, Japan for certain, and a lot of other nations do have them showing up in other places. But if you want the big rundown, Shadows of Asia from 3rd edition is your way to go. And this is the best copy I could find of the cover here, so I don't know too much about this. But honestly, let's just throw this up here, which is the Asian map. And this is the map that is directly in the Shadows of Asia book. So this is showing off a lot of what there is. And as you can see, one of the major things that you can notice here is, of course, a lot of the former Soviet states have now united into one. There has been some split apart by Russia. And China has shattered once more. We're going to talk about all these different things a little bit today and go into a little bit about these things. But again, this isn't a deep dive into every one of these countries. This is introducing to you them. And I'm going to be using a combination of the Shadowrun Wikipedia and the Shadows of Asia book, because there are a couple of nations that there are some stuff in Shadows of Asia book that I at least want to go over some information that's not on the Wikipedia page. So we're going to kind of play it between the two ears about that one. But let's start with the, I don't know if you could call it the elephant in the room, but the big thing that's going on here that you can easily notice, and that's China shattering. And this is something that has happened, very much so. And it is a result of, well, things like magic returning. The resource rush that occurred in the late or early to late 2000s caused a lot of issues here. This is something that certainly we encounter in a lesser degree in our version of the world, but the Shadowrun version of Earth hit this rush for corporations and their greed, and the decisions in the US encouraged a lot of corporations. So a bunch of provinces in China were dealing with the resource rush. In 2011, Tibet withdrew, and a magical barrier separated out from the rest of the world. That's successfully true. In 2013, Xinjiang seceded from China. 2015, Hong Kong secedes and declares itself a free enterprise. Great Britain, because of its influence, is kind of tricked into helping Hong Kong, but corporate interests really do that. 2017, there's a major earthquake in the Taipei mountain range, which was where China's main nuclear weapon stockpile was. There's some underground nuclear detonations. It collapses the entire underground arsenal. There's reverberations throughout northern China. One of these creates a crevice in Tiananmen Square and topples several monuments. The ones that were a part of the research rush had formed the Greater Canton Economic Development Council. They secede from China. And they kind of become the Canton Confederation. There's the Sichuan, Shanxi, and Inner Mongolia also withdraw, cutting off Western China from Beijing. Western regions then succeed. There's a coup in Beijing. And the reformers throw the Communist Party out of power. This is 2018. The nation's then the Republic of China. Then there's the Republic Civil Wars that last from 2019 to 2027. A lot of stuff happens during this time period, a lot of infighting and stuff. There's another war. In 2041 to 2044 is the Nationalist War. And there continues to be just falling apart battles. 2061, Beijing is recognized as its own independent city-state. So yeah, and there's probably more stuff that happens after where we majorly look at China, at least in this book, because this goes to 2062, and Shadowrun's timeline is 2080. So that's going to say that more things haven't occurred. But this is kind of just a wetting of your whistle about all the insanity that's happened. So let's talk about a number of these nations in China. We can kind of hit up on these and discuss them a little bit, and hopefully you'll get an idea about what's going on with many of them. Hopefully. We'll see. We'll start with the Canton Confederation, as I mentioned. So they are one of the four major splinter states resulting from the People's Republic of China falling apart. It's the four provinces of Guangdong, Huan, Jiangxi, and Fuanji. As well as the city-state of Macau. It's most of the economically powerful of the former Chinese states, but because it's a confederation system, it's got a lot of political infighting, so it doesn't protect itself foreignly very powerfully. It's prospered despite its rivalry with Wuxing, one of the major mega corporations, and has weaker than normal megacorp presence. After the Crash 2.0, they did contact their rival Wuxing to help them upgrade to wireless matrix, which has given Wuxing some into their area. And unfortunately, when we come to the 2080s, the Canton Conference is now, for all intensive purposes, a puppet state of Wuxing. They originally were their rivals. Things fell apart, and it was that resource rush that developed the Greater Canton Economic Council, which I kind of had mentioned in the overall things, and then Hong Kong's succession, big earthquakes and stuff like that, that allowed them to become their own place. And then, of course, they did have truces and stuff like that, but things like, they were involved in the Nationalist War and stuff like that, but, yeah. And, again, in the Shadows of Asia book, you can kind of see up to 2061 what's going on with them, and it's just that we know very little of post-Matrix 2.0 other than Wuxing's come in and honestly gotten probably big connections with them. So yeah. Honestly, visiting each of the Chinese states, former Chinese states, is kind of a hard thing to do. And I can dive into more depth in a lot of these. But kind of reviewing this one in and of itself a little bit is kind of like a good way to show off, especially because this is one of the more major ones. Yeah. The thing is, in lots of China, there was a lot of issues for things like metahumans have had a lot of issues. The Han Chinese were able to more accepting the emergence of metahumans than people in Japan, India, the Middle East, or some more conservative regions in the West. Metahumans have had some issues, parents abandoning or sexual children and stuff like that. Their treatment of metahumans in the Canton Conference is better than most of the world in comparison to a lot of other places. And it reflects Wuxing and their crime syndicates, triads, and both in Taoism and Buddhism. So, there definitely has been a fact that of a lot of the places in, honestly, the world and in what's going on in the former Chinese states, this is a pretty good one if you're a metahuman in comparison. Magic has become a big thing. The acceptance of Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, the reintegration of magic in Chinese society was a lot easier than many other nations, especially things like the Islamic and Catholic worlds. And because of this, Awakened are favored in a lot of these Chinese society. And again, Wuxing is this big influence there. And just as a note, Wuxing is the big mega corporation that's kind of the Chinese Hong Kong mega corporation headquartered out of Hong Kong. So it's when we talk about Hong Kong, we'll be talking about Wuxing some more. And again, there's a confederation. It still has some nuclear weapons coming from one of the successor states that does have them. 4 of them do. They have a standing navy, like many of the others. When Japan withdrew from Southeast Asia, we'll talk about it a little bit, they've been trying to fill up the power vacuum in the South China Seas. They've been patrolling a lot more, the Cantonese Navy, to try to keep away piracy, and challenge things like Vietnam, the Shiwase Corporation, and Wuxing has been investing in the Navy. So, hey. It's a thing to look at. The capital is, of course, Gaozhou, where, of course, Wuxing and Triads have their real power. And they have some other major cities to talk about. But, honestly, we can keep going, because there is more places to visit here. And we want to go over all of them, and let's go to Henan. So, Henan, we can talk a little bit about that. So, China broke apart into basically warlord states. Henan is where the hardline communists basically went into. They were invaded and occupied by a neighboring province of Saizi in 2062. Its government is a neo-communist regime. They're run by the neo-communists, but invaded, and they were preparing to invade Shandong, but some interventions prevented them from doing it. They've been hostile to corporations. There's a lot of anti-corporate polyclubs that have had a lot of connections with them. So, yeah. That's what I can tell you about Henan off the top of just that there a little bit. So, let's talk about Manchuria. We're heading north a little bit here. So, Manchuria. It's got a lot of mountain ranges, forests, and rivers. It is an awakened land, but has a strong base of industry and technology. It rivals the Elven nations in Amazonia in its deference that magic is given in those nations and that spirits receive. So, it is a very traditional Chinese state, is the best way to say it. Very, ancient ways kind of going over things with etiquette and stuff. A lot of the ways they deal with things in their modern days, they take on from that. They look up to a very strong Confucianism ideal. Yes. Other than that, The Manchuria doesn't recognize the business recognition accords, the corporate court's standard for meaning of corporate extraterritoriality. It does recognize the extraterritoriality, but only for specific corporations that are chartered in Manchuria, which meets stringent criteria. Foreigners limit how much voting stock they hold in these Manchurian corporations, including via methods of holding companies and such like that. Shenyang is industrial to vast level of a focus of heavy industry. It's one of their major population centers. And Changchun, I'm going to probably butcher these a little bit, supplies a lot of rail systems and it's a major pharmaceutical center. Let me just check if this has something good on Manchuria. Yeah. Sorry. Anyway, yes. So, there isn't much more to say, dedicated to connections with spirits and stuff. Very spiritual. And, yeah. It is open to all and free to all spirits of humanity. So shamans are very big there. So, yeah. And, yes, there isn't much more to go into about Manchuria that certainly we haven't reviewed. Again, these are... As much as I want to dive into depth about these, there's just not a lot of information that can be kind of talked about. And I'm trying my best here to navigate to sources and see what I can give you guys here, and figure out what's best to tell you. Sichuan, which is west of the Cantonese Confederation. Let's talk about them. It's a very divided state. It is militaristic, majorocratic warlord state in central China. So, yes. Its leader, General Liang, shot to fame for defending a territory from the Cantonese Confederation in 2042, in the war that was going that time period. He was promoted by the military general and staged a coup. In 2024, he marched to the capital of Shandong, and he became the leader. Under his leadership, he's conquered a number of parts of former provinces in the nearby area. Yeah. So the state itself is run by a general, which is an honorary title, but the people refer to him as general. It has elections, a legislature, a judicial branch, and calls itself a republic. It basically puts the general in basically support of everything on top of it. It's the largest of the successor states when it comes to territorial size. Its law enforcement is held by a separatist branch of the army. Regional garrison commanders have authority to override the politics decisions and actions of the civilian counterparts. Its military compares with that of the Canton Confederation. It has one of the most powerful armies in China. It also is one of the ones that have nuclear weapons, along with the Canton Confederation, and two others that I'm going to talk about, the Kingdom of Shanxi and the People's Republic of Henan. So again, Awakened is over the non-magical. When a magic or a magician or adept takes the civil service entry exam or promotion test, they're given bonus points. The Unawakened are informally barred from holding higher rank positions in local government. They're reserved for magic users. The ministers, chiefs of staff, secretaries of most major state ministries are either adepts or magicians, and also a lot of commanders of major army divisions happen to be there. It was a war-torn region. Under General Liang, it's become an economic powerhouse, and it is comparable to the Canton Confederation. The thing is, even though they are only one of the 4 states that inherited nuclear weapons, they inherited the lion's share of the nuclear processing that China had and its research infrastructure when it comes to nuclear power. So they do have a very good situation that they are in. Okay. let's head to, of course, north of there to the kingdom of Shazi. Yep. It's a region of desert in the north, mountains to the central region, forming a natural barrier between much of China and its subtropical zones in the south. So it's bordered by a lot of other groups. Anyway, during the Republic's Civil War from 2019-27, the province joined the independent state. The province of Shaanxi joined the independent state of Shaanxi. Neo-communists invaded and occupied part of the greater Shaanxi before being repelled. A military coup installed a junta that controlled the new state until it was overthrown by allies of the late Chinkitsu Cho, the father of Queen Michelle. Michelle Cho, who'd been evacuated to the United States following the assassination of her father by communists loyal to Beijing, who opposed the secession, returned to Shaanxi and assisted in development. She is still the queen. Yep. So, getting back in power, she's the royal head of state, drafted a new constitution, and basically created a constitutional monarchy very similar to the United Kingdom. The monarchy is a figurehead under the constitution. Queen Michelle still has a lot of power and influence because she's intellectual, she's got legal training, she's got a network of political and corporate figures that she kind of can influence. There's a House of Magistrates, the Upper House of Parliaments, and they'll choose her successor unless she amends the Constitution in light of her death or abdication. Basically, there's a situation where we don't know who's going to go after her, but there could be set up to change that, get rid of the monarchy, or change the way that succession is gone. Their history is very important. The monarchy is a reminder of regional history. Xi'an is located near Chigang, the capital of the Western Xi Kingdom. So there's a lot of history here in the entire area. And there is some arcane archaeologists that have had some interest in there because it has 4,000 years of history. So the Atlantean Foundation and APEP Consortium both are kind of getting into there a little bit. Its capital, of course, is Xi'an, which mixes tradition and modernness. It is the seat of their government, and it's also the major industrial center, one of the most major industrial centers in all of China, in fact. And the place has been imperial capital through a number of dynasties, which they're very proud of. Renraku, Shiwase, MTC, Ares Macro Technology all do some business there. So they have a lot of connections with big mega corporations. Yeah. And of the Great Wall, it extends to northern China, but their sections are the most visited still. The Huasha Mountains are there, one of the 5 sacred mountains of China. Is in the area. And the Great Dragon Lung intervened. There was strange magical activity on there. Now 3 armies are locked in place, and the mountain is no man's land, basically. There's a defense by Henan, Shanshu, and the Great Dragon Lung interfering, basically. And they've got the Tianhe Mountains, where the nuclear arsenal exploded. So the area has a lot of contaminated groundwater, and it's a buffer for all the other places nearby. And it's also got the tomb of Shui Hongti, the first emperor of China. Again, magical stuff all going on there with, things awakening and stuff like that. Ancient. So it's an interesting place with a lot of culture, and it is something. We can talk about Beijing. So, in 2058, the Wuxian magician Li Tanzi led a military consisting of ex-politicians and soldiers. They stormed the government complex, kicked politicians out in the street. Basically, Tianzi declared himself emperor. Tan Tian was headquartered there, moved to Singapore. Yeah. See if I can find out anything over here. Zoom in on me. So yeah, basically, there was another revolution, the old capital in this region here. There was a coup. A powerful magician came out of nowhere, basically kicked people out, conquered it, made himself emperor. The Republic, which it's set in the middle of, if you look on the map here, it is in the Republic of China, that Beijing is. Wanted to counterattack this entire thing. That makes sense. But, they didn't have a lot of success. Beijing and the Republic negotiated truce, and that made them an autonomous zone. And independent. And set up some diplomacy. The Emperor claims he's got the mandate from heaven, as a ruler of China, kind of thing. And he's put himself in place that way. Very ancient, probably historical claims connecting to very spiritual aspects and cultural aspects in that entire thing. And being a actual Wuxian magician probably helps in a lot of these cases here. So, yes. Anyway, it's got the Forbidden City, Tiananmen Squares there, and things like that. It's its own place now. Beijing has become separate, and it's a city-state. Let's talk about Hainan. So we're moving to where on the map here. I have to see where it is. Might be a city-state. It's sometimes difficult to find out where these things are. It's not Hainan, it's Hainan? Hainan. Oh, it's the island. It's the island. It's one of the islands, yeah. Okay. So the island of Hainan had declared neutrality, military-free zone, has small, capable militia. It's backed by a white oriental dragon named Ai Zhenzu. And so they became kind of their own independent little country. Again, it's a Chinese successor state, but it's a small island nation, and I don't see it very easily here on the map off the top of my head. I should be able to find it. Oh, there it is in the south. Okay, yep, the south of the Canton Confederation. Found it. Okay, I can locate it. It's a tourist and gateway with an open-door policy allowing everybody, irrespective of race and ethnicity, free to enter and leave as they wish. It's got a very lax government, and its strategic location and the free flow of people have turned it into a major international espionage nexus. Though there are gentlemen's agreements between these groups, don't mess with each other on the island and do not annoy those that are in charge. It's basically... It's a really interesting place, and if your Shadowrunner wants to get involved in some espionage, I'd recommend checking out Hainan. It'll go great. It'll be funny. Anyway. Let's talk about Hong Kong. Because I'm going to be honest here, I feel like Hong Kong is one of those places that really, as I've said before, could be its own episode. And I think I will make it its own episode at some point in time. This is one of those ones. Of all the Chinese successor states, I think I can point this one out as the big one. A lot of things have happened here. It is, again, it broke away, managed to get its independence in 2015. Wuxing chose to build its corporate headquarters there, and has made it an incredible powerhouse of economy and strength and things like that. The Wuxing group received things from Dunkelzane's will. That's to say something about them. Their government's reformed over a time period. There's been a lot of democratic groups, a lot of pro-corporate groups, of course. Honestly, corporations have influenced it very heavily. It's got two groups, the Board of Governors, the Elective Council. Elective Council is the legislative and executive branch of it. That's kind of where you kind of go. The Board of Governors. Basically, is a board of 8 citizens that serve as a kind of council for 8-year terms. So, okay, Executive Council is 2 big things in the government. It's got 8 citizens who serve on the Council of Board of Governors for 8-year terms. They can't be elected in consecutive terms. Every 2 years, 2 new slots open up the council. The Board of Governors places them in closed-door sessions. Every year, one of the members becomes chairman of the council. There's no limit to how often a council member can be chairman during their term. They see to the agenda, and laws passed have to have a 6-vote majority. It's got a bunch of districts, a lot of corporate presence, a bunch of crime. Again, Hong Kong is one of those places that I could kind of probably go into a lot more, because we do talk about it in things like the Shadows of Asia, but it shows up in a lot of other places too. Hong Kong is discussed in a bunch of places, and I think, other than Shadows of Asia, Runner's Havens has a lot of stuff on it. I recommend that book if you want to look into using Hong Kong, because it's a major location. Excuse me, I'm looking for hiccuping. But we'll leave Hong Kong for now. We can revisit it in the future, as I said. It might be one to talk about. We're not done with former Chinese states. We're going to try to get through all these in a meaningful and not too long manner. We're going to see what we can do. Let's see what we can do. Anyway, Ningxi. Anyway, it's a struggling nation surrounded on all sides by hostile forces, a small island of peace in war-torn China. Let me see if I can see it on the map and point out. Yeah, there it is, in the middle, between Sichuan, Shanxi, Mongolia, Gansu. You want to look it on the map? Yeah. They were once members of the Z Kingdom. It became an autonomous zone of ethnic minorities during the People's Republic. Since China collapsed, it has struggled with Gansu warlords and expeditionary monarchy of Shanxi, but it's maintained its independence. Anyway, there was like desertification, a lot of problems going on around the area. It's kind of wedged in this little area. It's there. We can talk about Taiwan a little bit too. Again, Taiwan in 2018, the government renounced its title of Republic of China and formally declared its independence from the mainland. So again, that's a lot of stuff to talk about with history and stuff like that. The independence Beijing promised would result in war, none happened. In 2018, when the Canton Confederation succeeded, they extended an invitation to Taiwan to join them. They declined. There were a bunch of people that wanted reunification, but it was enough lack of support that they didn't. But a good thing is that the Canton Confederation and Taiwan have had close ties together. So, the Nationalist War. Let's talk about that a little bit, because basically some nationalist sponsored polyclub won elections in Taiwan and parts of the mainland in the Canton Confederation of Zhejiang and Fujian. Again, I might be butchering some of these names. And rather than Taiwan seeking reunification with the mainland, Zhejiang and Fujian chose to join Taiwan. The Confederation invaded the breakaway provinces, starting the Nationalist War. They recaptured in 2 years Fujian. They mounted 2 failed assaults on the island of Taiwan. Because of Yang Hong in Sichuan and the western borders, they negotiated a truce with Taiwan, ending the war in 2044. Zhejiang fragmented into microstates, and there was an exodus of people from Taiwan to Southeast Asia because of this war. So it had some major ramifications on the entire region. Renraku has corporate presence, Transneranet, Shibata. Again, they're considered in the same kind of thing with the awakened Chinese states. Let's talk about, where are you? I try to find these on the map whenever I look at them, because, again, like, this map is... Oh, there it is, Yunnan, also down in the south there. Let's talk about Yunnan. So they took advantage of the civil war in China, and they declared independence in 2019. In 2024, Shan State invaded it and captured weapon parts and torrents. Bandit raids from Yunnan and Guangxi. In 2034, forced Vietnam to disengage from conflict with Cambodia. Vietnam invaded because they're fed up with bandit raids, the southern part, and were captured by, invaded both the states, and their southern parts were captured by Vietnam and Laos. In 2047, Sichuan captured parts of Yunnan. So basically, they just had a lot of area. And large parts of the country are controlled by warlords and criminals. So they're a state, sort of. They got a lot of issues. They've had trouble. They are one of what could be called the other splinter states. Not doing too great. Trying their best. Anyway. They're trying. Anyway, let's move on from them. Because we can keep going. We're not quite through China yet. Gansu. Which, if you look at the map, is, of course, north of Sichuan. So kind of like the western edge of China. It's politically recognized, basically large area of microstates. Warlords control each of the areas. They change hands a lot. Mostly the Gansu province is where they are. Some of Qinghai, Inner Mongolia. The only real political power that has its barely functioning government out of the capital of Lanzhou. It's kind of a frontier region, a no man's land between Mongolia, Tibet, and the states of Sichuan and Shanxi. So, yeah. These places are basically in a level of anarchy. Lanzhou's rule over the region kind of only exists because of the backing of several corporations. Nakmor, IFMU, and Urumqi. Basically, they have a transcontinental railway through the area, an artery for Europe, Asia area that passes through the city. And basically, there's a lot of natural resources of the regions they would like to have control over it. The most powerful warlord is Major General Pao Henshin. He was sent with a full battalion to quell the uprising in Tibet in 2011. They were caught up in the Maya cloud, which descended to isolate Tibet. And in 2052, his forces exited the cloud, finding the country gone, dissolved into warring nations, and they carved out a piece of the area, center of the city of Haiyan. He seeks to reunify China. Good luck on that one. The southern western portions of the regions are heavily forested, harbor a wide variety of paranatural flora and fauna. Northeast of the state is industrialized, has its majority of human population. And this new Silk Road, the transcontinental railway, there's a lot of cluster of people around that. And people are brought on by the local warlords. The fact is, a lot of the warlords know not to mess with the megacorps. The megacorps know not to mess with each other, or like some of the local kind of stuff. And so it's this kind of way of doing things. And there are rumors, of course, of warlords being, financed by megacorps to control areas, because maybe, then they'll trade resources with them. It's a region that has issues. There are three more regions. We're almost done here. We are almost complete here. We have really hit up most of them already. So, cool on us. But let's talk about the coastal provinces. They're a group here. Technically 4 more, actually. Also the Republic of China. Can't forget. Anyway, they were caught between the communist stronghold of Henan to the west, the corporate capitalism of the Canton Confederation to the south. It was basically kind of described as Asia's sweatshop of this region. So, piracies in the area, corporate meddlings have created a lot of random urban sprawls. There's poor economy, high population densities, lots of criminal elements. There's dens of wave slaves and pirates. And it's home to the Great Dragon Lung, this region here, too. When the Civil War happened, it was the death blow for this entire agency. New Guard communists fought hardliners, comrades into enemies. The infrastructure was collapsing. In 2063, when the Great Dragon Lung showed up, no one opposed him. There was no one to oppose them. You know? So, yeah. The Free City of Shanghai is here. It was once a pirate port. It's neutral ground for pirates and privateers. The Triads and the Great Dragon Lung's Red Dragons basically control the underworld politics. And unofficially, basically, the Great Dragon Lung, his word is law in this region. Unofficially. With his triad foot soldiers, his influence in local culture, if he makes a decree, it's gonna be carried out. Megacorps, though, they're lucky because the Great Dragon keeps out of local politics. He's more big picture in the Ring of Fire. So there has been some stabilization in this kind of region that really is sort of its own thing, with puppet governments kind of controlling the region, but not really, and a lot of corporate synthesizer. It's basically a bunch of micro-governments in this region that go to corporate masters. And now a Great Dragon that's kind of over top of everybody. It's a little bit of chaos. We talk about Guangxi, which is south of Sichuan, and Cantonese Confederacy just a little bit here. Oh yeah, I don't. There's a lot about Guangxi I can tell you about, unfortunately. Just nothing on the Wikipedia page, and I'm looking in the book just to make sure, because I don't know if there's not really anything to talk about Guangxi other than it is another one there. Oh, I'm sorry. It's considered a stateless region in Asia, because basically it's a region, but it's that's the stateless region. Kind of tells you all you need to know about it. It is there. It exists. It doesn't really have a lot of government and stuff like that. It's got its neighbors, but it's maintaining a level of autonomy. Anyway. Shandong. Which is... where? I can't see it on here on the map. Great. You know it's not. Oh, it's technically its own area now within the it's one of the areas of the coastal province. It's just an area of the coastal provinces. So if I guess I'd talk about the coastal provinces, I would talk about Shadowrun. Yeah. I see where it is here. Oh, that's where the dragon lives. Great. Great dragon. Ha, that's a joke. Anyway, so let's talk about the state which remains, which is technically with China. The Republic of China. Because it's a state that's there. It is it's still there. It's what's left out of China after losing 9/10 of their country in half a century. Also losing their capital. Yeah. There's two provinces, Hebei and Tian Metropolitan. This is the Republic of Hebei, the Tianji Metropolitan District. There's not a lot left of the Republic of China. It's still there. It's just lost a lot. When Beijing became an autonomous, Tianji became its capital. It was an important trading center. Now it's their, of course, government center. There are forces that probably... It's not one of the four large states, technically. That's the Canton Confederation, Henan, Shanxi, and Sichuan. It's just a lesser state that remains. So yeah. It is, the Republic of China. It's basically what remained after the fall of the Communist Party, that is China in a way. There isn't much else to say about it at this point in time other than it's there, it exists. Okay, let's move on beyond China now that we've hit up a lot of its locations, and let's talk about some of the other areas. And there's certainly a bunch of other nations in the region we can talk a little bit about. Let's talk about Korea. It's a meta-friendly nation on the Korean Peninsula between Japan and China. In 2005, the South Korean president was murdered by North Korean communist dissidents. There's Japanese support from a General Yuan, the head of the army, seized control and invaded North Korea. So basically, there was rumors that Japan had been involved with the assassination of the communist assassins, the North Korean assassins. But then Japan supported South Korea invading North Korea. North Korea retaliated with the nuclear strikes against Japan. The missiles all failed to detonate. And by the end of 2005, Korea was unified. Japan sent Imperial troops to guard North Korean sites weapon sites after that. Koshun Industries formed from the merger of privatized North Korean companies in 2007. 2011 had their first Spirit Village. The 2023 saw the President General Yuan dying. Admiral Park selected by military as president. The Eastern Tiger Corporation forms in 2030 with a merger of Samsung, LG, Dwan, and South Korean Energy. 2040 saw BLT abuse leading in epic proportions. And so there were some social organizations with Reverend Sun Mung Moon's Unification Church, which kind of went against these things. 2055, the Unification Church has revealed its front for insect spirits. Of course it is! Insect spirits! In 2059, the Pacific Prosperity Group is formed, with etc. Samyang and Kuashum as founding members. In 2060, General-elect Huang retires following a financial center, and General Kang Ho Lee becomes president. In 2064, Kaohsiung Industries files for bankruptcy. Protection is bailed out by the government. Net games are very popular in Korea. In 2064, Korea replaced Japan as center of the gaming world. And most game developers have labs in Korea, except for Jambo Games. Matrixation is very high in the country. The society is technophilic, similar to Japan. Cyberware and similar enhancements are popular. Fortune-telling charms, geomancy are very common. Since the Unification Church was banned, a lot of new cults form in the area. Their traditional shamanic beliefs have made comebacks because, hey, magic came back. It does still profess to be a democracy. Basically, it's back in the 1970s because Korea is effectively a military dictatorship. The General Lee tried to use nationalism, portraying Japan and Japanese corporations as occupiers, and to support the government, which puts him in conflict with Japanese supporters who have always been in place since the, reunification. There are numerous political parties. The Korean Communist Party was banned by law, but still exists. Yeah. And Japan does send imperial naval ships to Busan to subtly remind the Korean government who's really in charge. The fact is that, Korea is still technically its own state, but because Japan's intervention in helping with the reunification and setting up of the military effective dictatorship that is in charge, technically, they do have huge amounts of influence over the entire thing. There are a lot of corporate influence in the country itself. Some important criminal organizations that are put out of it, and in Shadowrunners, women are the majority of Korea's Shadowrunners. Men are riggers, street samurais, or deckers. But again, that's a very interesting fact that the majority of the Shadowrunners are still women in Korea. Older runners tend to be more respected due to their relevant Confucian values. Shadowrunners tend to work for one fixer, and working for multiple ones is discouraged. So, on the dragon, Mang layers increasing. So, very interesting culture for Shadowrun in Korea. Bangla, or Bangladesh if you want to call it, or the Bangla, the Bangla Commonwealth. Here we go. So, Bangladesh independence in a new constitution ratified on the 50th anniversary of 2021 established a Commonwealth as a modern Muslim nation between India and Burma. It is a stable and growing economy, despite having a history of economic poverty. Yeah. He just hit it badly. There's been a lot of nationalism, anti-megacorp kind of hits here and there. And Prime Minister Hassan Maud basically has been a forefront in a lot of stuff for them. They've modernized the capital of Dhaka and 5 major regional capitals, established a compromise to form corporate Islam, creating job boons, revitalizing the economy. Dhaka's skyline of corporate skyscrapers, rivaling Kuala Lumpur's, and its massive canal and bridge networks divide to stage its seasonal flooding, and its elevated highways to attest how far it has risen from the muck. There's still old corruption that's there, poverty in the regions, but the living standard is rising every year. So it is a nation that has found itself basically, it's an Islamic parliamentary democracy, and they've seen themselves rise themselves out of things, regardless of all the things that have happened. So the Bangla Commonwealth is actually doing pretty good. The Indian Union, which honestly I think is another one that I can do its entire episode on, because gotta move this section book here. Just India, basically. You know, I'll have to do an episode on it on its own at some point in time. So yeah. Anyway, there was a limited nuclear exchange with Pakistan in the Indo-Pakistan War in 2030. Turned most of Kashmir into a wasteland. Kota was nearly destroyed thanks to the Vetus and fires that kind of happened with that. But it's now the largest city in the Indian Union with 10 million citizens. And it's rebuilt itself out of the ashes. Basically, Vetus plagued it, fires followed it. Vetus started in New Delhi for it. There are 2 metahuman variants that are confirmed in India. The dwarven one called Haruman, and a 4-armed human known as Narataki. It's a federal republic. The president is elected every 5 years and is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The Parliament of India has a lower house, a National Assembly, and the upper house, the Senate. National Assembly is elected every 3 years. Prime Minister is normally a member of the National Assembly. The Senate, or State House, is legislation of Indian states, electing 10 senators to serve 6-year terms. There have been several referendums in the states asking their people if the state should become an independent country. They've all failed. But in response to this, there was the Parliament passed the India Act of 2030 that made it clear if a state in India wished to leave the country as a whole, it would have to ask the people clear questions and get clear results. Basically, with governors of various states protesting the act, declaring states independence, sparking crisis in the 2030. They've got a Supreme Court. They control the government controls the Shirak Kota launch facility. I'm butchering that one. Brahmaku has a corporate presence. It's got the Indian Army, Indian Air Force, Indian Navy, and the president's commander of all of them. It's a nuclear country. The caste system is very strong with Hindu. There's a lot of cyberware implantation with the Kshatriyas, the warriors and ruler caste, and the Munis, the cleric subcaste, are a form of ascetic worship. So there's a lot more to dive into, though, for India, honestly. It's got just a little bit of chaos, but it still maintains itself as a powerful nation. So yeah. The first Vetus, 450 million people died. It was a huge thing. It was signed as a sign of the god's displeasure. The plagues, the awakening, herald a Hindu revival, basically, during that time period. Then sacred sites awakening. The Ganges, Indus, and Jamuna were purified, becoming powerful mana lines. Of course, Vetus returned again. India withdrew from the UN. The secessions that were failing. The chaos that had been kind of hard. People trying to get for independence. Then, of course, Kashmir getting hit with the exchange. When they were attempting to become separatist too, a little bit. Anyway. Calcutta has replaced Bangalore in 2055 as the economic capital. There were insect spirit problems. They cleared them out in 2056. And yeah. There was some surge effects in 2061. And so, yeah. We've got a lot of things going on. So, again, Indian subcontinent and the Indian Union remains a country. It has maintained itself. It has lost a lot. I mean, I'm sorry. 450 million dead. When you say those words, that is the Vetus Plague. And it shows you how devastating the first plague was. And that was just from the plague. And the plague came back again. The number of people lost. And so New Delhi still is the political capital. And Calcutta is the economic powerhouse. So, Bollywood still is very powerful in Bombay. And, there is a lot more to talk about, certainly, with India. As I said, it will probably be an episode on its own, but that gives you some general ideas on India. 2 hours here. Khalistan. Let's see if I can talk about Khalistan for just a moment. So there's bad blood between the Sheikhs and the Hindus, even more than the Indians and the Pakistans. Basically, Sheikh separatists declared independence from the country when it was reeling from the crash, and the Indian army committing to escalations in the Kashmir regions. And so Sheikhs have a hatred for what happened next. Basically, the tactical nuclear strike that occurred. So Khalistan is a new nation that has had, well, been nuked. Pretty wastelandy. It's the nation that came out of the Kashmir wastes, basically, in a way. Nepal. Talk a little bit about Nepal. It's an old-style monarchy nestled in the Himalayas. It's got some corporate occupation in the area. The king was mysteriously ill in 62. There was civil unrest, maybe almost a word of a coup. The thing is, they have orichalcum in that region that appeared with Halley's Comet. So, it's a little place there. And there are Yetis in the area, because they're a thing. So, Yeti tribes and shamans basically have been keeping prospectors out as much as they can. So, there's this kind of like old school monarchy, a lot of megacorps trying to get in there to get the orichalcum, and then, fight back from the natural people that are there. It's a mess in Nepal. It's a mess. We can talk a little bit about Pakistan, as you can see on the map there. So again, they had aided the Kashmir insurgents. Then there was the nuclear strike. Pakistan had launched 4 nuclear weapons of their own. 2 exploded in launch pads, 2 struck in Kashmir. The corporate court and the UN managed to keep India and Pakistan from escalating in the 2030s. So basically, the corporate court then covert operation removed the Pakistan's nuclear arsenal, strengthened the civilian government. There was a number of top elected governments and coups occurring, and it ended up with a military junta led by General Yenagar, now ruling Pakistan. He nationalized Pakistan companies, signed the business recognition accords, basically to attract foreign investments. Multinational corporations have not responded for the most part. The Western province rebelled. Yenagar was unsuccessful at putting them down. There's warlords fighting in the western province. Kashmir's been a wasteland because of the exchange. Yeah. So, yeah. A lot of issues in Pakistan itself, too. It's war-torn. You know, fortunately, unfortunately, the corporate counts getting in on it. Has basically kind of some of the nuclear threat from them. But yes. So it's a mess there. It's a mess in Pakistan, unfortunately. Destabilized heavily. Talk about the island of Sri Lanka a little bit here too. So, Sri Lanka. There was a protracted insurgency pitting Tamil minority against the majority Shimalese. Peace agreement brokered eventually with a island nation's influential Buddhistic monastic council, the Shanga. So it's been a lot of turbulent things going on in there in the entire, and now they're down to a presidential democracy as of 2062. Remember, a lot of this information is as of 2062. We've got some updates post 2062. We don't have a lot of updates post 2062. Keep this in mind when I talk about these things, because this is what is provided by books and stuff. There's trade partners, getting a lot of the entire island up to culture and stuff like that, appealing. Things like tourism and stuff like that, trying to get that kind of stuff up and running. There's a lot of efforts to improve Sri Lanka, but it's been through some stuff too. And has a lot of corporate influence at this point. Sri Lanka. Tibet. So you can't get out or into Tibet without powerful magic or a seal of the green gloves bequeathed by Dunkelzin's will, which was to Ino Anaki of the CEO of Renraku. So that's an interesting thing, is the CEO of Renraku was given away into Tibet. Just think about that. So basically, the Maya cloud was basically erected around Tibet to get it out of China, isolating it from the rest of the world. Sasquatches visit the Pangbosh Monastery immediately after the awakening. The cloud became more powerful during Halley's Comet, but has since weakened to allow some to travel through the possible in 2064. For half a century, they've been sealed off. They live an agrarian life with magic and influence of the Buddhist monks prevailing in their society. They've got a Dalai Lama. The death of the 15th Dalai Lama in 2051. They've been searching for the 16th Dalai Lama. It's ruled by two stewards. The 12th Panch Lama, who's tutor to the Dalai Lama, and Nakung Kutin, the state oracle. So they have no corporate presence. Corporate presence have been around to study the cloud. Maybe get any magical artifacts are there. And getting in there and out with those is big things. The Dunkelzane Institute of Research Magic, Lantu Fountains, Wuxing, and APEC Consortium all have interests in Tibet because of that. Big interests. But yeah, no, it's still cut off from the world by the cloud. Again, doesn't mean you can't connect with it in a little bit, but not easy. Alright, well, now, Japan. We do have to mention Japan. It's one of those ones that I think I've talked about diving into at a point in time on its own. It's certainly one that I can look at and say, we will talk about Japan on its own. But it's the Imperial Japanese State, the JIS. The current Emperor of Japan is Emperor Yasuhitsu, who replaced them in 2061. Current Prime Minister is Shobo Kazama. So, effectively, in this timeline, Japan's Imperial Empire began in 2005, when they backed the South Korean reunification efforts. Nationalism in 2006 rejected pacifism, returned to the imperial state. In 2012, the Yamato Act removed pacifism from their constitution. The emperor was now head of state, and gave megacorporations the ability to basically do pretty much anything they wanted. And then their anti-metahuman laws were established during this time period. Japan and magic, spirits, Ryumyu, the first dragon, reappearing. All these things were looked upon very accepted by Japan, looked on favorably. Shintoism returned in a resurgence. The emperor's position, unfortunately, metahumans were not seen so well. Dwarves, elves were seen as strangers, mutants, onis. Orcs and trolls were deported to volcano islands known as the Yomi. So, in this time period, the Empire has risen and fallen. I'm going to tell you that now. We're going to talk about this a little bit. We might go into, basically, it a little bit, but basically, into the 2021s, the 2030s, Japan had effectively a imperial thing. Basically, taking over, getting influence of a lot of different areas, invading various places. They were kind of unstoppable military. But it all led to a fall in 2061 with the Year of the Comet, when the Ring of Fire basically exploded. Volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, earthquakes, the current emperor and most imperial family died. Over 240,000 Japanese citizens, not including the sinless, died. Whole cities reduced to ruin and rubble. The military force was called back to basically restore order. They withdrew from everywhere they had invaded: the Philippines, Hawaii, Australia, Peru. The ones in California defied their orders. That was an entire thing to continue there. And then we have reforms, basically. Because only one direct descendant remained of the imperial order. The emperor's 14-year-old grandson, Yashito. He was declared emperor. And he's progressive. Cares about his people, including metahumans. He reversed the Yomi decree, outlawed any further discrimination against metahumans, hired several Oni as his bodyguard. The Yamamoto Act was reformed, opening up to foreign investment and competition. The emperor and the Shinto priesthood declared that the devastation was an inevitable consequence of the actions of Japan Corps. So they had smaller corporations and stuff rebuild a lot of Tokyo, and it would be supervised by spirits. Megacorps were given the job of providing logistical support and rebuilding cities where the spirits could not go because of polluted astral space. In 2064, the emperor married 19-year-old Hitomi Shiwase, who happens to be a member of the Shiwase Corporation, noticeable there, who supports his policies and helps technomancers. So, yeah. So, anyway, changes have happened in Japan. Foreign mega corporations now present. Metahumans now can walk the streets. And the thing is, these policies are popular with the general population. So there may have been a lot of, like, racism, looking bad things that happened, but, honestly, after everything that happened with the Imperial Japanese state, and in the last 16 years, Japan has basically evolved to something that is somewhere in between the imperial state it was and maybe a little bit of the world-connected state that it was before that happened. It's evolved in a direction that, fixes a lot, There is still a lot of xenophobia in Japan, as it is, and a lot of what's happened over the years is there. There's still bigotry that remains, unfortunately. Accepting of metahumans is becoming something more, but it's still a hard thing to do. So it's a constitutional monarchy with bicameral legislation of the diet. Yeah. 47 prefectures. There's probably more to talk about with Japan. Certainly there is, and a lot more with its history. But I think just, it's a world where, like, we can see sudden changes, sudden arrival of dwarves, elves, trolls, orcs, honestly brought up the worst in a lot of people, a lot of fear, racism, these things like that. Again, changes like this bring fear, and fear can lead to mistrust, confusion, not knowing things, and honestly, a lot of times, things like racism or hatred. And it can be seen in Japan, too. And, yes, there are reforms and changes, but it's slow. And certainly, changes are happening. And there are still older, more traditional elements in the society that is there that kind of have to go away, but we'll talk more about Japan in the future. That's basically the gist of it. It is a big country to talk about. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about Mongolia. Yes, Mongolia. They're still there. So, Mongolia. It has a very important presence of magic to the entire nation. For the steppe nomads, which still exist, or even city dwellers. Nomadic clans are revived a lot of times by ancient shamanic rites. Ritual drums now summon spirits. And nomads use their, sacred spirits to protect them from cold winters. Guardian spirits are very important. Free spirits are worshipped side by side with Buddha. And the thing is, even with less technology, the modern nomads of the Mongolian steppes live a lot better than their ancestors that they did in Fifth World. When you go to the cities is what you feel the magical pulse. Urga, once known as Ulaanbaatar, if you walk the streets there, shamans selling their magic, foretelling the future. Vajrayana Buddhist monks are there. The living Buddha, or Bogd Khan, is kind of like seen there. Lived in Mongolia, but his 8th reincarnation died in 1924. 9th hasn't been found. So, yeah. So the living Buddha is kind of seen as the ruler of the kind of region a little bit there, or spiritual leader at least. So, Mongolia is controlled a lot by nomads or foreign corporations, kind of have their self there. Mongolia is friendly to metahumans. Orcs are about 23% of the population. Orc rockers made an impact on Urga's tent suburbs. And now traditional monks and shamans walk side by side with young orcs speaking Orczet slang, listening to orc-exploitation music. So the Mongol orc community is on the uprise, kind of in a heavy way. That's Mongolia for you there, just a little bit, as the scene for it. Russia! We mentioned Russia a little bit when I talked about it with Europe. But we will have to talk about it in depth in its own episode. Has a powerful institution with the Red Army. They're militarized. Every adult, male or female, is required to serve in the military for at least 24 months. The Russian Orthodox Church is still very ingrained within them. They've got a huge bit of bigotry and racism throughout their entire things. That still exists. State magicians are a thing. The idea of cultural groups that had magic were kind of ostracized. But with Return of Magic, that's historically magic ability was kind of shunned, ostracized, and cultural groups that believed in it. Magic Return! Now you serve the state. So there's a wedge between the awakened and non-awakened population. So yeah. The Yakut territory is its own thing, if you can kind of see there. It broke away. We'll talk about that in there when we talk about them a little bit, but it was in the 2060s that there was a lot of battles with them and things like that. We will have to talk about it more in depth, which was once Siberia. But yeah, Russia's had a lot of issues. It's gotten a lot of fights. It was involved in the Euro Worlds 1 and 2. There have been a lot of issues and breaking apart. And basically, the Russian National Supreme Soviet. It's a state to definitely dive into. The Red Storm was new. Anyway, it's very authoritarian, so it's still got that complex web of intrigue since the Communist Party collapsed, and it kind of has a lot of ultranationalism that still remains. Very powerful. Anyway, let's, though, have to revisit Russia at some point in time. The Transpolar Aleut Nation, I've mentioned them a few times here. They're the northern nation at the top, of the world. They're involved in a lot of continents. Anyway. Burma. We can talk about Burma. We've moved down to the Southeast Asian portion of our tour at an hour and a half. Let's see if I can get this done in half an hour. I don't know, maybe. It's on the mainland. It's technically a democracy, but it's very corrupt. Burma has had a lot of issues, to say the least. We're talking about Southeast Asia. Definitely. I haven't even gotten to the Middle Eastern side of things, because that's an entirely different issue, too. It really is. Asia's pretty big. Has a lot of nations. There was a military dictatorship that took over for a while. A lot more corruptions. There's a lot of bidding of corporations, drug cartels, opiate trades and stuff like that, drug syndicates. There's just a lot of issues when it comes to the entire regions. And it's just unfortunate that it remains its own country, just not in good shape. Cambodia we can talk a little bit about. Vietnam invaded them in 2022, aiming at Phnom Penh. Cambodia suffers a lot of damage that eventually Vietnam withdraws in 2043. The country is ruled by King Cindereth Suwath and his heir prince, Naradolum butchering these names. Sorry about that. The main political power rests in the Prime Minister, Mak Sok. There's currently a Naga insurrection attempting to restore the Naga kingdom in Cambodia, which met limited success. So yeah. A lot of the recent wars, government corruption, it being poor, not a lot of infrastructure support. There's not a lot of corporations coming into the region. Its economy is kind of just in shambles. And Angkor Wat is home to an awakened rebel group made of Mara's harpies and led by Nagas. So, yeah. It's there. You know, it is... Cambodia still remains. It's just got a lot of issues, unfortunately. I guess that's the best way to say it. Got a lot of issues, unfortunately. So, we can't say much more than that it's doing its best in a world which wars and battles have really put it in a bad position. The Kashan State, which, if you look on the map, I can see it in the map here. Yep, there it is. It's independent from Burma, basically. I think it's the Shan State on there. Maybe? Well, Shan State's a different one. Anyway, it's independent from... it became independent from Burma, experienced research in Buddhism. It had been Christianized 2 centuries earlier, now blends Buddhism and Christianity. It turns people away from the drug trade and technology. They try to return to a life of farming. It has links to Tibet, and it wants to go on a pathway similar to them, becoming kind of a hermit realm similar to Tibet. So, yes. Oh, there's the Kashan State. Yep, I see it now on the map. Jeez, trying to find these things on the map. It's not easy in this. The Kurdish and Autonomous Zone. Kurdistan. It's in the Middle East. Let's talk a little bit about the Middle East. They waged an insurgency against the Alliance for Allah and achieved an independence in 2043 under leadership of Ahmed Massoud. It's been involved in the conflicts in eastern Turkey, and it's buffered between the insurgents ruling it as well as the insurgents in Syria. It's ruled by a neo-communist Kurdish Workers' Party, led by Ahmed Massoud. They control civilians' daily lives very strictly. They don't trust outsiders, so foreigners kind of settling in the state is very difficult. They're independent, but they aren't recognized by any country in the world. But there are some countries that trade with it. They give aid to the Secular Republic of Western Turkey when it's during its conflict in Eastern Turkey. His failing economic policies, Massoud does remain popular because of his role in independence. And he keeps the Great Dragon Arden in the region at bay. There is some dissenters saying he made a pact with Erden. But, you know, together in military forces. And it's got a stagnant economy because of the separation out there. So you can see Kurdistan in that entire region there, kind of suffering a little bit. Laos, let's talk about that. It's, for all intents and purposes, right now a Vietnamese colony. It's reliant on the Vietnamese military for defense northern western borders. The Vietnamese corporation Khang Combine dominates the economy. It's desperate to regain its own sovereignty, but yes, it's effectively under rulership of Vietnam at this point in time. At least for now. But it's trying its best to gain some semblance of independence again. Alright. Let's continue on. We aren't done yet. Surprisingly, we aren't done yet. This might go 2.5 hours today. Longest video I've had in quite a long time, but there's a lot of countries in Asia. And I want to give you just enough about them. I'm out of iced tea. Let's switch to water. Gladly, I have 2 drinks. Because I'm going to need it for today. Let's talk about the Middle East a little bit and Iraq. Because there's Iraq and Iran that are 2 here, and we'll talk about them just a little bit here. So the Federal Republic of Iraq, as it's known. Anyway, it's ruled by President Shari Ati. I'm probably butchering that very heavily. It's been a mess. It's all Arabs since the Kurds are independent. But it's still split between the Shiites and the Sunnis. Sadr supports the government in referring to access to the oil fields, which is the last significant oil reserves in the Middle East. The president, of course, dances to Sadr Krup's tune, is popular with the rich and the corrupt. Oil's almost gone. Sadr Krup's taking his money elsewhere. So the economy is kind of wearing down. Some want to join the Arabian Caliphate. Others want Islamic republics. Quite a few want megacorps to take over. So civil war is brewing in the Federal Republic. It's a great place for runners in the meantime because, you know, there's a lot of things going on there. So, yeah. Anyway. There isn't a lot of laws, religious police, or anything like that, so people just cast spells, use abilities, whatever they want is. There's a lot of deteriorating abilities and things like going on. The Shiite clerics are kind of a wild card in all this entire thing. So the country is kind of stagnating. And, well, you know, things might go bad. If civil war breaks out in Iraq. Then there's the Islamic Republic of Iran. In 2020, response to the jihad declared against the emerging metahuman races by Iran's ruling Ayatollah, the Dragon Ardent demolished the city of Tehran. At the end of the Second Iran-Iraq War, after replacement efforts of Ibn Elsa, let's see here. It is one of the world's most conservative countries. It is technically a democracy. Iran follows strict Islamic law. Most Iranians saw Tehran's destruction as a test of faith and have followed Islam by the book ever since. There's a lot of acceptance more of magic and cyberware, even though they're religious. And the new capital is Ifstan. Tehran is left to rot. Anybody can get voted to parliament, but the candidates are different when it comes to religion. If a moderate gets elected, the Guardian Council can veto any law not deemed Islamic enough. So, yeah. There's a lot of radicals and stuff there, too, and it's a very conservative state. Yamamatsu East and other megacorporations own a lot of their industry. So Yamamatsu is a very powerful thing there, and there's some other groups in megacorporations that operate out of it. And, you know, it's an Islamic republic. So keep that in mind if you're in that area. But there is, you know... It is probably the strongest source of that in the Middle Eastern area. Oh, where's this in the map? Thank you. Patani. There it is. I found it. It's above Malaysia. The Patani Islamic Republic. It's in Southeast Asia. In 2047, it was born. Basically, it came about when Buddhists fleeing the north after a campaign of terror by Muslim separatists. Thailand's military grew tired of the resources being sent to fight the insurgency. They originally petitioned Malaysia for membership, but were rejected. They have a crippled economy. A lot of them turned to piracy and smuggling between Thailand and Malaysia. It's a small country in between them. The Shan state, which is over near that entire region too. Hey, it's near Burma. It's run by drug lords, both Shan and Unis. Biggest market for law, largest producer of opium and methamphetamine pills. So it's another basically corrupt area where a lot of things happen that is there. We try to be nice about a lot of these regions, but it's another region that if you look at the map is basically, it's got a government technically. Anyway, the Kingdom of Thailand. Yes, the Kingdom of Thailand. So, anyway, 21st century started out really bad for the region. Deepest natural disasters, wars ravaged it. When King Ramza the 12th died with no heir, a military junta took control with the help of Japanese corporate interests. They eventually recovered from internal strife and natural disasters, the cost of a lot of human life. They gained territory from neighboring Cambodia and Laos, lost the entire Patani region to Muslim separatists, which we're talking about. So yeah. It's existing there. Thailand's trying its best. It's not actually even in the call Shadows of Asia. We'll talk about that a little bit. So, I would like to talk about it more, but, that's all I got for you there. Good old Vietnam. So it nationalized the Quang Combine to help keep the economy from grinding to a halt. Its war with its neighbors led to the nation finding itself isolated. The government is slowly liberalizing their economy to the outside environment. It's had a lot of hostile relationships. Its foreign allies are Russia and Aslant. They tend to be very paranoid and xenophobic. Yeah. Foreign companies are operating in Vietnam if they find a joint venture with Clang. So, yes. I mean, we've seen that they've been, from Hanoi, they've had a lot of aggression and battle with their neighbors and lot. So, Vietnam is there. The Southeast Asia is just a hotbed of battles and lot. Definitely. Can I talk about you? Can I talk about you? Yeah. Oh, sure, of course. I don't know why I should. Anyway, Malaysia! That's weird. Found a mistake. These happen. Malaysia. So. Anyway. Let's talk a little bit about Malaysia. The country's sovereignty is elected every 5 years by and from the 9 heraldry rulers. It's a constitutional monarchy. The role of king, called Tan Sri Abdullah Tekwa, is ceremonial. The constitution makes the king the herald of the Islam in Malaysia, which is an interesting thing. They've got diverse populations from a lot of other nations. They've been a very big trade between Middle East, India, and China. So a lot of other cultures. Religion's a big thing. Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism do flourish with some Christian churches. Though Islam is, again, the national religion. They do have this juxtaposition between everything because of this. Mosques, temples, all kinds of festivals. The Indians there are Hindu. The Chinese there follow the supernatural. I mentioned that. Anyway. The cabinet is led by a prime minister. The current one is Tunku Mohammed Rahmed, leader of the Nationalist Alliance Party. They've made a lot of economic progress. Political stability is maintained by restricting political freedom. So there's not a lot of dissent between the entire thing. There is a lot of courting Western and Japanese corporations to come into the area and have a lot of investments and stuff too. There's been some friction between various Chinese groups, and Malaysia has also existed too, especially within the nationals that are there in the country. But they are an online country and building themselves up. A pretty good powerhouse in the entire region. And Kuala Lumpur is one of the world's commercial centers. So it is a very high-tech business zone. So it's a pretty big there, too. We'll talk about Singapore then now. Singapore Inc. we should talk about connected to this, because it's in this entire region there. Singapore is a city-state, the former Republic of Singapore, and is basically its own corporation, which in 2031 it formed. It's controlled by CEO and board of directors. Each citizen is a citizen and a shareholder. So, yeah. Singapore is a pretty big location there, and it is its own country and its own corporation. It's an interesting thing down in that entire area. Let's move on, though, because that's another one to mention for another country. Sri Lanka! Which, if you see on the map, is where in here? Did we talk about Sri Lanka? Wait a second, I thought I know about Sri Lanka. Show up again. It did do that again, where it showed up twice in this list. Anyway, let's move on then. We got a few more to do. We're reaching the end here, though, fortunately. And some of these I've talked about in other places, so maybe we can leave it there. Oops, open that a new window. That's gonna be pleasant. There we go. Close it. Alright. We'll have one more group of these things after this one. So the Enlightened Kingdom of Bali and Lombok, which is a name, which is on this map somewhere. God damn it. You know, trying to find these places in here is not easy for this entire thing. I can tell you very little about the existence. Someone in the Shadows Invasion book mentions it. I'm trying to find the Enlightened Kingdoms of Bali and English CW. Anyway, it's a state in Asia, and I can tell you very little about it. The Javanese Republic. It's one of the places that came out of Indonesia when it collapsed. It's another one of the groups of nations that collapsed and reduced to a bunch of different states. Basically, once Indonesia collapsed, the economy crashed, elected governments were capable of fixing things, military took over and declared martial law, the majority of the public supported it, the military junta revived the policies of the Sharta regime in the 20th century. Once peace was restored in Java, they sent forces to regain control of the rebellious provinces. They received stiff resistance from the Sumatran Alliance and Dayak Council, which put an end to their plans. Java then began to invade Malays and the Australian territory, which ended up formation of the Australian-New Zealand Allied Confederation against them. So that was a thing that they helped cause. So Javanese Republic down there at the bottom, as you can see. That's one of the things that remains out of the shattered bits of Indonesia. Which it kind of broke apart in the 2010s, similar to when China broke apart, also had a lot of issues with that. 2019 was when they were formed, but yeah. a lot of these other places have just broken apart. And as you can see, I don't know. Let's talk about a few more of them, just a little bit. The Sumatran Alliance is one of the states that emerged from them. AX separatists took advantage of the opportunity, seized control of the island of Sumatra, and succeeded from Indonesia. They tried to take control of it. The Sumatran Alliance has remained independent from them. Let's see if I can talk about each of these. That's that section there. There's the Sumatra Alliance. Anyway. It's got regions, a lot of diverse ethnic groups in their regions, and they are about 40% of Indonesia's exports. They control it now, still, too. Anyway. So, the Dayak Council of Borneo and Sulawesi, again, it was born from the awakening of the rainforests of Borneo and Sulawesi, and established Dayak Council of the indigenous Amis tribes. That's a mouthful. Yeah. Residents, towns, and cities were forced to relocate to either the Sumatra Alliance / Sumatra or Java when the awakened forest took back the land. A few coastal villages were permitted to continue to exist. The awakened forest kept them at bay. There's not as many people as you think. There's only about 8 million people on there. It's a tribal council. Again, it's mostly the group that it was in charge, that the tribal people that were living in amongst the forests. Again, with a couple of small fishing villagers. So. Let's talk about something in the Middle East, which takes up a large portion of the Arabian Caliphate in the Middle East. So yeah. It was formed when Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Bahrain, by the Islamic Unity Movement led by Badr al-Din ibn Isa in 2055. Saudi Arabia's last king, Khalid ibn Sonan, ensured militaries of Bahrain and Kuwait were destroyed by military action of Israel during the Great Jihad in order to ensure extensions of the powers. Ibn Isa chose Saud as the first caliphate of Arabia. In return, Kalim Sudamad in... I'm butchering this very hardly. This is me being very uneducated on trying to pronounce any of these things. So apologies to anybody that, can just help me on these ones here. In 2063, Jordan's king, under the pressure of the new Islamic Jihad activists, appointed a new government comprised of religious hardliners. The new government decided to merge Jordan with the Arabian Caliphate in December the same year, and so Jordan was no longer an independent state. Let's see here. Ibn Elsia was a consultant valuable ally of Ibn Saud, even though they were rivals. Even upon his death in 2061, he was resurrected in Mecca in the year of the Comet, when Ibn Elsa announced the new Islamic Jihad. There was a power struggle between the Caliphate and Ibn Elsa lasted until the winter of 2064, when Ibn Elsa was dismissed from his position in the Islamic Unity Movement by Saud in 2064. It was in the crash of 2002, it was discovered his body had been occupied by Sadim, a body-snatching spirit, since his assassination. So, it's still... Hello. It's still a very tumultuous region, to say the least, there. Even though they've united under one nation, so to say. So yeah. There is a lot of things about it that you can kind of say. It's still a conservative region in the entire place. Like, mages are accepted as long as they practice religious beliefs of Islam. Let's see here. Chrome should watch your step, because you could be beyond Allah's designs. Women are still treated pretty badly. Metahumans are seen as tainted. It's unfortunate that, again, it's still a conservative region, and with everything going to shit in the Shadowrun world over their version of the last 80 years, it didn't improve anything, It almost made things worse and worse. We can talk a little bit about Turkey and, of course, Turkey? We mentioned a little bit about Turkey when I talked about Europe, and that there is technically 2 groups there, Western Turkey and Eastern Turkey. I'm talking about Shadowrun, the tabletop RPG, and its world, which is in 2080s. It's a alternate timeline Earth. So I'm talking about the various different countries. And I'm introducing Asia's countries. So if you wanted to play in these places and know a little about them. So yeah, Turkey, it kind of fell apart in 2039 when they joined the Alliance for Allah, which led to the Second Euro War, the Great Jihad. And when that failed, the nation basically split in half. Western was more secular, which is technically in Europe, which you kind of talked about when I did my Europe episode. And then the more traditional Islamic controlled in East. And then they kind of have had like a various war against each other for a pretty long period of time. Turkey is a mess. It's secularism versus Islam, a lot of these things here, and currently it's at a point in time where it's a thing to say, like, it's kind of one nation, but not two. Like, if you look at there, they call it East Anatolia, is like the other area that is technically Eastern Turkey. So if you look on the map that I'm showing up there, that's what that is. And as of 2064, they were kind of separate, but their civil war is kind of broken down a little bit. It's not as civilly and battly against each other as much anymore. We kind of quieted down a little bit here about this entire thing. And of course, I did talk about how Constantinople, and when I talked about my Europe, is a free city now, technically. It separated from Turkey entirely in its own city-state. So we'll leave it at that. I did talk about that during my European time of chatting about things. So, Cyprus, which is also in Asia on the corner, all the way over on the side of this entire map as I'm showing it, is technically a place to talk about. It's a big old island with Cider Krupp, the mega corporation's presence there. Can I talk a little bit about that one? Do I have a little bit about Cyprus? I do! It got devastated during the Euro Wars. Turkey invaded it to basically control the Mediterranean in the east. It was bombed a lot and stuff like that. Turkey and Greece, who did a lot of their battling on there, did nothing to help rebuild it. There are more Turks left on the island than there are Greeks. Like the Turkish mafia took over the island as a base. So it's kind of forsaken, island of smugglers, criminals. There's some Greeks that use some profitable business, live in fortified ghettos. Turks subsist on fishing. Whatever was left of this island, it's just kind of not in great shape. So it's there though, Cyprus. We can talk a little bit about Israel, Palestine, and that entire mess as it was, and Jerusalem too, because Jerusalem is technically independent now. We can talk about that. So, the entire thing is at basically the Jihad, our Euro Wars, Jerusalem survived. They had Militech corporations, effective intelligence, superior magic, nuclear capabilities, and some Palestinians who refused to join the Alliance for Allah during that Great War. Basically, when the Palestinian leader died in this world's version of in 2004, politics changed on both sides when Arafat died. Arafat's successor accepted Israel and Palestine got its autonomy. Basically, they split in this time period. Both peoples claimed Jerusalem as their capital, but in early 2012, after Dracovin Spears attack, forced authorities to evacuate and close the city for 40 days. Additional evacuations occurred regularly in the following years. In 2046, Man of War, the UN seized the Holy City before anybody comes. So the Holy City is now kind of just independent from everybody because they kind of are still fighting over it. So, yeah. Anyway, there was some chemical attacks by Libyans in 2004. In 2075, theoretically, they were livable again. Israel has a lot of corporate presences, of course, and it is a very small region. But again, this entire thing where they made a peace with Palestine, and when we get to 2065, relationships have actually improved very well. They've got a kind of security fence that separates us from them. But it's basically easy to cross legally now. They basically have been doing their best to keep this fixed. And the true Republic of Palestine was born in 2065. Though it kind of gained this sort of pseudo-independence, it really, it became a separate, its own territory. It took still very long time with everything going on and everything battling it out that it took forever for them to finally become their own independent state. But they have now, 2065, and of course then, as I mentioned, Jerusalem is its own little place now, separated out because of, magic. Again, it's a world where magic came back, so magic does it to us. Alright. So, I've got a few more to talk about, and let's talk about the Yakut and Papua New Guinea event. I'm butchering those two. Please, English, stop butchering you. So, Yakut. Let's talk about that. It's Siberia. It's magic. It rebelled itself from the rest of basically Russia, and a lot of incidents and things happened. Things like the crash and stuff, and eventually they were able to break themselves away and become a new state out of Siberia. So. There's a kind of spiritual civil war going on that entire region and a lot of other issues going on, and it's not probably... It's battles against Russia or kind of like rebelling against that. It's already done its thing, but anyway. It's a very savage land, place of shapeshifters and magic and beasts, and it's separated itself out. Very much so. So I can tell you a little bit about that. I can tell you nothing about Papua New Guinea other than it's on the map, isn't it? Or maybe not existing. Oh yeah, New Guinea's over there. Can't tell you a lot about New Guinea. Let me check, just make sure I don't have a reference from New Guinea. Nope. It's an unfortunate thing that I know it's on the map there, and I can't tell you nothing about it other than it's on the map there, and you can see it on the map there in the bottom. Isn't it Oceania? Nope. Oceania is the thing that we'll have to talk about. Future episode. Anyway, I have 5 more nations to talk about. We're almost done. The Trans-Caucasian Federation. It was created after the Euro Wars by the Caucasus countries. It was Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. Basically, after the Euro Wars, they united together in this region to kind of keep some control. So certainly, they're kind of on the edge of the Middle East, near Russia, but they're kind of their own thing right now. having found a way to kind of break away and get some semblance of their own thing. So you can see them in the south of Russia, north of Iran, and Kurdistan on the map there. The Commonwealth of Turkestan, which has Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, all united together into Turkestan. And that is a hell of a thing. Oh, there's a transcontinental. Sorry, missed them, found them. So, it is the crossroads of Asia, it's known as. It's basically Central Asia, in between all those things, in between the Chinese world, the Christian world, the Muslim world, even probably a little bit of influence from the Hindu world. It's just this kind of thing in the middle of this stuff, with Turkestan kind of in the big thing. In 2034, the Islamic regimes invaded these nations to try to invade Russia. 2035 revolts against them. They end their war with Russia. And it's 2041, where these nations that have been devastated by plagues, magic returning, massive, natural disasters, more plague, infrastructure collapsing. In 2041, they united into this new nation. And then the Silk Road, which is the transcontinental railway, was completed by the Seder Krupp in their territory now. So they've prospered under the Nil Silk Road, this major highway and railway that kind of links St. Petersburg with Qingdao in Shandong. So it's this major branch that kind of crosses the entire thing and has kept them to... So it's two countries in one. There's the kind of techno-corporate area around the Silk Road, and there's a lot of steppe nomads in a lot of these regions here. And a lot of them join together under one leader, a Khan, which kind of controls them in their regions here. And so a lot of these old countryal regions, you can kind of see different groups that kind of control and exist within them where the old countries used to be. But they're united together in this one group and exist together. Pretty decently up to now. But there are conflicts that happen in amongst them, mining wars, mega corporate influence, a lot of things like that. They've got some toxic zones that make it a little difficult overall to be perfect. We can talk a little bit about Syria. It's over there in the entire region. They were the power base for more radical moments of the Islamic Unity movement. The government's been very belligerent with a military takeover of Lebanon. Syria treats Lebanon as an offshoot, and its kind of invasion is symbolic. So another country, if you're ruling in Syria, you're dealing with Hezbollah, which they turned from terrorist organization to crime syndicate that basically controls the Syrian underground. Turns out crime is more profitable, I guess, or easier to keep power in. So they started in Lebanon, expanded to Syria, with help from the Bedouin nomads. How close it is to the current government, hard to say. They're based out of Damascus, the capital of Syria, of course. And they've got some nice illegal markets for doing plenty of stuff if you wanted to. Whatever you want, you can get it. The Afghanistan, which you can see is still technically on the map there, and still its own thing. Well, in the 21st century, everything that's happened, they've become a place of warring in and of itself. It's considered a very, as much as there are portions of a lot of other areas within Asia, within like some of the former Chinese states, Southeast Asia, where warlords and battling happens, this is pretty bad when each city is controlled by its own warlord, not regions. Kabul is run by a mafia that seems to take orders from Seder Krupp. The entire place is just a mess right now. It's barely its own nation in a way, because it just battles with itself kind of a lot. They're constantly fighting with each other. There's a lot of miserable deaths that live in their entire places. Dusty villages where there's shepherds and farmers. If you're lucky, you work for a warlord. The Kabul Mafia is the true rulers. It's a criminal organization that appeared in the 2040s. Gained control over the country. Warlords who dealt with them got rich. Others disappeared. Ended up on poles. It's got a huge smuggling route between Iran, Turkmenistan, Pakistan. And again, State of Crypto is the only real corporate presence there of the mega corporations. So, the Mafia doesn't have control of the Hindu Kush mountain ranges. The Kata tribes control that area. So, there's some independence there. Sort of. Let's finally end up with our last nation in Asia for today, the Philippines. We can talk about them. And then we've gone over, in about 2 hours and 15 minutes, every nation in Asia. I'm getting exhausted here. So, it's an archipelago of 7,107 islands. When the Japanese imperial state had an umbrella group of nationalist environmental near arms called the Huk, led by the Eastern Dragon Masu, vying for control of it since they landed 6 divisions in 2021. In 2072, they finally became independent again under the Huk government. Basically, effectively, the Huk, this group, had been competing with the Japanese imperial state for control of it. Japanese imperial state now becoming less of an empire, basically, have stepped away. It had the occupation of Japan that was there for about 50 years. The Ring of Fire erupting. The two dominant megacorps are Wuxing and Evo. So yeah, when we talk about the Philippines, the unfortunate thing we talk about is that they've had such a long time of being controlled, and this kind of war in between the two groups, that they finally have a level of themselves again, but it's just been this long battle between the two groups that has unfortunately devastated a lot of the nations. So it's getting better, and that's what a lot of this the devastated world of Shadowrun is. Getting better. And not all the time, unfortunately. It's one of those things I have to say about it is, unfortunately, taking a step back now and finishing up for the day. I talked about it with a lot of the other regions that I've talked about and discussed on my deep discussion topics. Here. Especially when I talk about things like various regions in Shadowrun. The Sixth World, the world of magic, the world of Shadowrun, is a place where it was destroyed. Through plague, fire, magic, and death, the world that we knew, the version of it that we knew at the turn of the century, died. And this new world came into being. And honestly, it's a world that does echo some of the evolution of our own societies as we see it now. And that's, I think, a very important thing about, even though it's an alternate world history and an alternate world, we can see that there are certain things that exist in our way of life and our way of doing things that certainly could be seen in the Shadowrun world. And in this Asian world, we see it a lot too. We see a lot of these things that exist. And yes, many nations have shattered. Some have remained strong with each other. They've found ways to exist, even amongst all the death and destruction and stuff like that. Others are havens for criminals, or places where people just make do and survive. But even with the world's population devastated in so many times, in so many ways, over the last 80 years of this world's history. It still exists. And it's interesting to see all these many nations and the forms they take then, and the history paths that they chose. Violence, hatred, distrust, fear. They're strong emotions brought on by a lot of these things, and you can see the decisions in a lot of these nations come about because of them. But you can also see that there is, honestly, that goodness of humanity in a lot of places. That even in these times where you do have a lot of oppressive governments and regimes that have taken control and hardships, a lot of places seek to still have betterments and improve their nations. And there are plenty of nations which are improving. Are their governments the best in the world that there could be? Are some of them, honestly, a little more than dictatorships? Yeah. And no, they're not the best. Are they maybe still fine places to live? Well, yeah. Because there are places in the world that have found a way to exist in amongst all this chaos. And have found a way to build themselves out. You know, I feel like the Asian nations, in a way, show a lot of that. And there is a diversity in the entire continent that can be seen. From the Chinese states, the successor states, the Indonesian successor states, from India and its powerhouse, from what the Middle East has evolved and become to Southeast Asia, and even Russia and what it has, and the Yakut. A lot of these nations have found their way. Is it the best way? Who knows? But in the Shadowrun world, there's always an opportunity for business. Whether you're visiting Korea, heading to Japan, stopping by India, or maybe even going somewhere like Iran or Iraq. Plenty of jobs for Shadowrunner in the know. You just have to know how to get around the locals and keep within the cultural confines of wherever you're visiting, especially if you're a foreigner. Many of these places still have a lot of xenophobia and, honestly, distrust, because, well warranted from many years of war, death, and problems. Anyway, I think that'll be it for today. So, if you're joining me live on Twitch, oh, welcome. Always glad to have you. If you're joining me when this video goes up on YouTube, hey, you can always check me out live on Twitch. Giving a follow on Twitch, giving a subscription, like a comment or something on YouTube, always good. Ring the bell if you're already a subscriber. Comment, hey, here's a question. Have you used Asian countries in your Shadowrun games? Or is it something that I've inspired you to have? What ideas would you have? That's a good question. That's the question of the day. Remember, check out all my links below. Discord, Twitter, there's good links below. And I'm going to say for now, to the YouTube side, because I'll chat a little bit more with Twitch. Farewell and goodbye, YouTube. See you next time.